Every shooting, like the one in Colorado, we in the media and in society, we ask the same two questions. Why and could this have been prevented? Often we seek those answers from the parents of the killer, and quite often those answers, well, frankly, they're not forthcoming. The parents often go into hiding. Some people get angry at the parents. Nancy Lanza was one of her son's victims, but she was also the one who connected him with guns and who watched his emotional disintegration into a pit of violence and anger. And what of Adam Lanza's dad? We've heard nothing from him. What about the Klebold's or the Harrises, the parents of the Columbine shooters? What about the Pearsons? In the book Far From the Tree, Parents, Children, and the Search for Identity, author Andrew Solomon interviewed the parents of Dylan Klebold from Columbine. He interviewed them multiple times over 7 years, and Mr. Solomon joins me now from New York. Thanks for being here. You've studied hundreds of families who encounter a wide range of issues with their children. How much should we hold the parents of these teen killers accountable?
I think it's very comforting to hold the parents of the killers accountable. It makes us feel like the situation can be controlled. But I think it's often misguided. Some of these kids come from very disturbed homes, but many of them have extremely loving parents who are trying to pay close attention to them. Certainly with the Klebold, they were really quite wonderful parents, and they had no idea what was going on inside their son's head.
Well, you spent a lot of time with the parents of Dylan Klebold, and the mother, Sue, told you that, quote, "What I've learned from being an outcast since the tragedy has given me insight into what it must have felt like for my son to be marginalized. He created a version of his reality for us, to be pariahs, unpopular, with no means to defend ourselves against those who hate us." So, talk to us about what they're going through and what you learned about their relationship with Dylan before the shooting. I think a lot of us have a tough time imagining that there were no warning signs at all.
I think they had a very loving relationship with Dylan, and that he appeared to be an adolescent who was a little angsty, and that they had moments of thinking that he was struggling a little bit, but nothing major, nothing serious, and certainly nothing that was threatening to other people. If they were concerned about anything, they were concerned that he was himself sad and might be a little bit depressed. And after it took place, they were in a state of complete shock. It was inconceivable to them that the child they knew would be capable of such a thing.
So let's turn to the parents of Adam Lanza. Last week, I spoke to Nicole Hockley, who lost her son Dylan at Newtown last year. I asked her what she made of the evidence that Nancy Lanza, the mother, had kept guns in the house and had even provided her son with weapons. Here's her response.
I believe that the Sandy Hook shooting could have been avoided if the proper intervention had been made, if he and his family had received help, had sought help, and had received help at an earlier stage.
Obviously, each one of these tragic stories is separate and distinct. What do you make of Nancy Lanza and her involvement with her son, providing him with guns, allowing him to fester in this cocoon of hatred in his room? Does she bear any responsibility for what happened at Sandy Hook?
Well, look, what happened at Sandy Hook was an unspeakable tragedy, as these events are tragedies. I think it's clear that if she had thought that he was dangerous, she would not have left the gun sitting out, since he used one of them to kill her, and she presumably didn't want that to happen. I think she was bewildered by her own child. You know, we all like to think that we know our children, that we know their inner lives, but people keep secrets from their parents. People keep all kinds of secrets. The Lanzas actually did seek help. They went to a number of psychiatrists with Adam, mostly because he had Asperger's syndrome, and they were trying to figure out how to help him to function. None of the professionals who saw him ever picked up on the possibility that he could pose an acute danger to anyone else or to himself.
Andrew Solomon with insights into what it's like being a parent of one of these teen killers. Thank you so much for your time.